All right, verse 9, 1 Thessalonians chapter 4. It says, "But concerning brotherly love, you have no need that I should write to you, for you yourselves are taught by God to love one another." Verse 10 says, "And indeed you do so toward all the brethren who are in all Macedonia, but we urge you, brethren, that you increase more and more." We'll stop here just for a second. Now, I read last Sunday the whole chapter. We read it to you. Hopefully you remember that, or maybe skim back over it before Sunday school this morning. And it was Paul is addressing some of the things to the Thessalonians now that they need to maybe increase. He said he had a desire to go there and be there so that he could increase their faith, that there were some things that they did need to work on. But one thing here that he said, that their brotherly love was something that he didn't need to talk much about, because they were doing a very good job in how they were basically loving individuals here. That they were loving in the church, that they were conducting themselves in that way to a high regard. I believe when you begin to kind of dig in a little deeper, they were probably loving the community very well. They were kind of outreaching. They've got a lot of things to combat within the Thessalonian community there that the church was built. You got to remember, these are Grecians, these are Greeks. They are great philosophers. They are very educated. One of the more educated people in those areas. We have some of the greatest mathematicians that come out of this sector. They have had a lot of different religious followings. They've had different gods that they've worshiped. So when they go out and they're presenting Christ to people, there is a great things to combat in the history of these people. They've kind of jumped ship a bunch of different times according to their history to what they believe in. They weren't for long periods of time just zeroed in, but they also kind of lends them to the type of people they are. There are people that are philosophers and educators, and they want knowledge, and they're very interested in it. And just to be honest with you, you can't really get a whole lot of new knowledge if you're always closed-minded, if you're not ready to receive something new that you've never experienced before from an educational standpoint. So these folks are the people that are very open-minded in receiving the knowledge. That's why they do. That's why these great mathematicians and these great philosophers come out of this sector part of the world, because they are very open to receiving new things and educating themselves, and not being set that this is the only way things are, but maybe there's some other thing that they could learn. But on the backside of that, they also kind of jump ship a lot too on their philosophies. So what the philosophy was today may not be the philosophy tomorrow. So there's a lot of things that the Thessalonians had to combat, but yet Paul said, you're doing a great job with how you're loving each other, and loving even, he said, the brethren in Macedonia. Like they were hard to love or something in Macedonia, but you're loving good there too. But then what's really more interesting is, just like anybody in here, I think our application for today is that, there are some areas in your life that you're really good at, that you're really gifted, you're really blessed in. There's areas in your life that you have concentrated on immensely in your Christian walk to try to develop, to try to make a strong characteristic trait in your Christian walk, that you're really strong in this area. Now, that may be loving people, that may be in hospitable with people, it may be all kinds of different characteristics that maybe a Christian should have, and you may be really strong in these certain areas. The point here is, no matter how strong you are in that area, he urged them to continue to increase more and more. So when you think you can love somebody a certain amount, he's saying love them even more. Even though, Thessalonians, that you excel in loving the brethren, I pray that you would love and do it more and more and more. Whatever your strong area is in your life, and all of us probably have several different strong areas. I would say that if you've been walking the Christian walk for quite a while, you have developed some strong areas because it's inevitable, because you've concentrated on your faith, you've concentrated on trying to be righteous and holy and let God impute these things to you, that it's inevitable that some strengths get built. It's just, as we're alluding to a Christian walk, the more you walk, the stronger walker you're going to be, right? The stronger you live your Christianity out in your life, there's going to be some strengths that you're going to develop. Now, you hear all kinds of people. We always allude to your strengths as, I don't struggle with this sin. I don't struggle with this sin because I have a strength in this area. And somebody else may struggle in that area. That they may have issues with that because their strength's not in that area. I know some folks that there's very few folks when we talk about the tongue. Most of us, we have issues with our speech and our talking about folks and gossiping and things of that nature. And every once in a while, you'll come across somebody that's really, really strong in that area. Now, those are very few and far between. But I can think of one off the top of my head, and he's not a mentor, but he could be a mentor. He is a family member, and most of you would know him if I called his name. But I asked him one time. I said, "Why? You're very quiet. You're very, very quiet." He goes, and he says to me, he said, the fewer words you speak, the less you'll get in trouble. The less you have. And I can't think of any time that I've ever been around him that you won't be able to bring him hardly to talk about anybody in a negative way. I mean, he just won't talk. I mean, he just shuts her down. He don't say anything. I mean, he won't. I mean, he literally won't say. He don't even say, "I'm not going to talk about this." He just don't say anything. He just zips her, and you're just, the conversation has to change because it's just not going to go anywhere. And you can see that's a strength that has been developed in him from probably natural ability of just being maybe a little bit of a quieter type person. But he is, I'll be honest with you, he's a preacher, so he can preach, and he can preach too, pretty well, pretty good, really good. And so it's not somebody that doesn't communicate with other people. It's just somebody that knows when to communicate and when not to, I guess. But he's developed a strength there. So even though that we're really strong in certain areas, Paul encourages the Thessalonians to increase more and more. Now, I've had to really work on a few things in my life in concentrating to know what I am good at, all right? And the things that I'm good at, sometimes I need to stick with those things. I'm the epitome of maybe trying to be the jack of all trades and the master of none, trying to know just a little bit about everything, but not really being able to do really one thing really, really well. And especially in my career, I've had to understand that, I have to kind of stay with maybe what I'm strong at and gifted in, and continue to develop that strength and continue to cultivate that to another level. It's as far as like maybe the church goes, I don't know where I guess it would be. I guess this would be like I need to probably, for me, spend my time and concentration in teaching, trying to continue to be a better teacher, be a better preacher, be who I am, but and not step here and try to be that singer that I desire to be. My dream to be a singer, even though I have no strength in the realm of singing, I have no vocal ability whatsoever. I can barely talk. I mean, I can talk good, but it just don't make much sense, But then to sing. So Paul's saying, even though that you're strong in this area, do not neglect it. Continue to work on it. Work on it. See, what I could do is I could just say, I'm already pretty good at teaching. I'm already pretty good. I'm just going to work nothing but playing a musical instrument and singing, because that's my dream. And I got zero talent. I got zero anything in that area, but baby, it's my dream. And then I just leave these strengths alone. And here's what happens. It's like anything else in life. The lesser you do it, guess what happens is you won't be as strong at it either. All right? So when you start stepping back a little bit from certain things, it's just like working out. If you don't lift them weights, the muscles ain't going to work. Or if you say you're a walker and you consistently walk and you try to get that good cardio exercise with walking, especially this time of year, it's so hot. It's really hot midday, but boy, those really late afternoon, 7 o'clock-ish type walks are really enjoyable. If you get up early in the morning, I'll just be honest with you, them 5:30, 6 o'clock walks are really nice too in that cool of the morning. That's the favorite ones of mine. Of course, I'm not walking, but walking a little faster, I guess you might say. Not a full sprint, but anyways, those are really nice. And if you quit doing that, if you do that for a certain period of time and then you just quit it, well, all that strength that you built up from doing that's going to leave because you're not doing it anymore. Your body says, I'm not doing it anymore. A lot of ways, this is the same way, in teaching or whatever your strengths are. I guess you could be very easily in this love. If you quit loving folks, like you say, well, how do you quit loving folks? Well, some of you have such a hospitality of love. I mean, you meet a stranger and you can just, the love for that stranger just oozes out of you. I mean, in some sense, you're having to almost kind of ring it in because you're afraid to scare them off, that you want them to know that you care so much about them because you care about their soul, you care about their self. Really, that's one of the great things that probably makes RCC a different place is the love that you show people when they come in. I mean, I see several of you. Strangers show up, and it's not one person that shakes their hand. It's not two people that shake their hand, but it's 3 and 4. And then it's great diversity between male and female that come and kind of talk to them, especially if they kind of set in your area, in your vicinity, where you can kind of get to them pretty easily. And you'll hear that from our visitors sometimes when you say, hey, do you really? Well, you got a great friendly church. I mean, sometimes they'll call it a hugging church. They'll kind of handshaking church. They'll call it different things because they're not accustomed to doing that. And obviously, some people just want to be left alone. I don't know if they really want to be left alone, but they kind of want to be left alone because of what's going on in their life, and they don't want to get close to folks, and because of whatever's happened in the past. But if you just quit doing those things, it could be real easy to get grouchy all of a sudden, get less hospitable, get caught up with the controversy that goes on in the world continuously, and just get a bitter taste in your mouth because you're not operating anymore in really your strength or your gift, and it begins to withdraw. So always remember, I think, in the Scripture, whatever God's blessed you with, He encourages biblically, whatever your gift is, to operate in that gift. You need to operate in your strengths, in your gifts as much as possible so that you can increase them more and more and more. And then our also go, even though we don't see it here, even though we're talking about operating your strengths, whatever our weaknesses is, we don't want them always to be weaknesses. I don't want certain things to be weakness. Now, I have a little bit of issue at times because I do concentrate so much on weaknesses. I think that's why this is so real to me, that I have to my strengths I don't tend to pay as much attention to, and then they get a little weaker. And, but in some realm, what are we trying to do with life in general and our Christianity? We're trying to find the perfect balance anyways, aren't we? We're trying to find great balance where everything kind of evens out, and that we're doing the best that we know that we can do to live our life holy and acceptable. Paul says, Thessalonians, don't give up on this, don't quit this, even though you're strong in this area. Keep increasing more and more. Verse 11. Verse 11 is very interesting. He says, that you also aspire to lead a quiet life, to mind your own business, and to work with your own hands as we command you. Next verse 12. That you walk properly toward those who are outside, and that you may lack nothing. So there he brings in kind of that well-balanced part, that there's nothing that you should lack. But now, to put this in context, he talks about, studying to be quiet here in the King James Version. He said, pretty much though, in general, the church at Thessalonians was pure and it was an example type church. In other words, it was the church that other churches could look at to build. This is the example or the template of how we should begin the building of the church. Now, I'm not talking about the physical building, but just the people and the spiritual building. He said, yet there seems to have been some idle, tattling people among them, some who disturb the peace, some individuals who, under certain pretense of religion, they went from house to house, and they did not work. They kind of were burdensome on others. They were continually meddling in other people's businesses. They were making parties. They were procuring their bread by religious gossiping. To these people, the apostle gives those directions which he gives to the whole church, that they should enforce wherever there was some trouble or some dangerous people were found, that they should study to be quiet. They should study to hold their peace, that they, as their religion and their faith would not be promoted as true religion if they were just doing these things, that they should do their own business, and that they should leave others alone in this sense, and that they should work with their own hands, not be a burden to the church. Because what happens, they were actually living off the church a lot of times too. Like, in other words, instead of they had the ability to do something, they were basically letting the church buy their groceries, letting the church pay their electric bill, letting the church, every time something come around, letting the church take care of everything. Not that the church shouldn't help with things like that. We're not saying that. But if the ability is there to do something, Paul's saying you ought to do something. If you can work with your hands, you ought to work with your hands. If you can do a labor, do a labor. But apparently there were some kind of doing that. He's basically saying, don't be a contributor to the church, not necessarily something that's weighting the church down. Now, again, just to preference this, there's nothing wrong with us helping each other. We should help each other. We all go through some bad times. We all go through some low economic times sometimes, the way things happen. We may lose a job. We may gain a job. But that's kind of the point, that we just don't give up and say, this is here's a free check. We're just not going to do anything. We want to keep doing as much as we can possible, and then let the church help us. Let them help us to be better than what we were. Those, there was idle people, and he says, though they were able to discourse like an angel or pray like an apostle, they need to change the way they were and not do this. They need to become true members of the church of Christ and walk and work and labor. That they might walk honestly, verse 12. He says that you might walk properly, one says honestly, toward those who are outside. That they become respectable, as in consistent, purity, holiness, have a great usefulness to their Christian calling. I've always said that, my gosh, we need some Christian plumbers. A lot of times God saves you right where you're at because He wants you to impact right where you're at. I mean, you get born again and you think everything's got to change. You start walking in your Christian walk and you think, everything's got to change. There's an individual that we've come across that just, pretty much up and quit a really, really, really good job because, he just thought it wasn't what God wanted him to do. And we tried to give him some encouragement. And at the end of the day, everybody's got to follow their own path. And it may work. I think it'll work out perfectly fine for them in the long run. It's just temporarily, it's not looking too good because that new job hadn't popped up in the last few months. So guess what? Now we went several months without job and just barely scraping by because either we got ahead of the cart or we got ahead of God, or you know what? It's just easier to use God as an excuse just to quit things that we just are not super pleasurable with. I tell you, I really do. I've been probably one of the few people that have been blessed enough in my mid-20s and up to have a job that I enjoy going to predominantly almost every day. I'd like to be off a lot too there's some days that I just soon go fishing than go to work, and I'm like everybody else. I'd like to go do something different than have to go into work. I mean, when it gets pretty outside and it's really hot, I don't want to be cooped up in a building all day, but so I'm just like everybody else. But predominantly, I'm not going to wake up and dread going to work Monday morning because of what I've got to face. But that doesn't mean, it's not because I've got just the best job in the world. It's just because I am where God put me at, and I understand that. And even though that I could wake up and be the most negative person. I could pick out every negative thing. I'm going to have to deal with millennials, and I'm going to have to deal with Generation Zers, and I'm going to have to deal with iPads, cell phones, and every kind of, I can just give you a list of negative things that I'm going to have to deal with multiple individuals in one day, and you would think he's got the worst job in the world. But I don't. I know that I've got a platform, no matter where I'm at, to impact wherever I'm going to be. And God's got me there. Here's what we have to understand. No matter where we're at, God is there. God is with us. No matter where it's at. If it is in, Pastor Case, I think it was Wednesday night, Pastor Case preached this a little bit. No matter if we're in the depths of hell, God's there. God's everywhere. He's with us. He said, I'll go before you. I'll be waiting on you. If you ever get a hold of it, God knows your future. God's already saw your future. So that means God's already in your future. So wherever you go after church today, God's been sitting there waiting on you. Because He doesn't know where you're going. That's why He can say, I'll go with you all the way until the end. I'll never leave you. I'll never forsake you. That's why He says, be strong. Be courageous. Because I'll fight for you. I'll be with you. The encouragement and the strength of God, no matter where we're at, is there. No matter what platform we are. And we've basically got to learn in the sense that no matter what we're facing today, God can make that a better day. And God's got big things for you. You're not always going to stay in the same job. You're not always going to be doing the same thing. But while you're where you're at, you got to be a representation for the glory of God. You got to be a representation of heaven. You got to be like, I don't like sitting on this factory line either. But by George, I'm going to do it with all the might I can. And God's got bigger and greater things. But by the way, why I'm here, do you know that Jesus? Also, there's also a very great big principle that we find in the Gospels. That if God can't trust you with a little, how's He ever going to trust you with a much? I don't have to talk to this bunch about this. But we've got a younger generation that really needs to understand that you got to start somewhere that ain't like what Mom and Daddy's got now. Mom and Daddy's worked 30 years for what they've acquired, what they've accumulated, whatever it is. Listen, you don't have to have a lot, but for 30 years you can collect a lot of stuff. You ain't got to make a lot of money. 30 years, you take care of stuff, you'll have something. I know some folks that's got tractors that are 30 years old and they look brand spanking new because they've always took care of them. And 30 years ago, that tractor was a lot cheaper than it is now. And it still does the same job that new one does. I thought, man, can I buy that 30-year-old tractor from you? I think I want that one. Because you've always kept it good. It does that same job. He said that we need to be representations to those that are on the outside, those that are outside of the faith, those that are outside of the church, those, the King James says, those that are without, those that, in the Thessalonians, those unconverted Gentiles, those unconverted Jews, that they may see that, you're kind of in the same spot. There's whatever you do, there's a whole sector of other people that do that same job that you do somewhere. Now, it may not be for the same company. It may have a little diversity there. But a lot of times, there's somebody that does pretty similar to what you do. And plus, there's a network of individuals that you interact because of the job that you do. And we're called to be a representation. The light's got to shine in darkness. If the light's always running from the darkness, then it can't shine in the darkness. It's easier not to shine in the darkness. It's easier to get in a room with a bunch of light bulbs because you can hide. Right? It really is. But when you're in the darkness and you're the only one shining, you're a big target. I understand you're a big target, and it's easier not to be the big target. But you got to understand, you're the strongest person in the darkness. I mean, I've got to learn that I'm just going to have to take some junk. I'm just going to have some. Listen, the devil's going to throw fiery darts at you unless he don't have to. You know, the old timers would say, if the devil ain't bothering you, you better get in the altar. I tell you, I love the old timers. Old timers say, Tom, the devil been bothering you? I'd go, nah, the devil ain't bothering me. They look, Tom, you better get in that altar and repent. I'm like, what? He said, if you're living right, you're going to be getting bothered by somebody. Somebody not going to like you living right. Somebody not going to like you trying to pursue Christ with all your might and all your power. The devil's going to put somebody in your way to just poke you. It's not going to be easy street. It's going to be a fight. And then I started learning that. Oh, it's going to be a fight then. So that's what we got to do. So we're just going to live a life full of fight. Boy, I'm telling you, you got that. You get those teeth. I looked over at Charles. He's like, yeah. I felt some Rocky theme music coming on. You know, I mean, you know what you're in, and then what you understand is, okay, so if it's going to be this way, then it's going to be this way. We're just going to fight every day of our life. We're just going to be a fighter. We're just going, little blood, that's all right. I'm used to that. Hit me again, I'll hit you back, And we get that mentality like, no matter what you throw at me, devil, I'm just going to block you. And then I'm going to attack with the Word of God, right? Thessalonians, if we can get into it, it's one of the few places that we see another reference of the armor of God in Thessalonians. So let's progress on here. Them that are without, he said, that you wouldn't be lacking in anything. So we see here that God really does want you to be blessed, so you're not overly dependent. There was a theology that I was told. I really didn't grow up that Christians just ought to be poor. And I don't know if that was back in the 50s or the 60s, or if there was some kind of mentality of that, you couldn't have anything and be a Christian because wealth would definitely attract you away from God, and you couldn't have both. You couldn't have any kind of wealth and be a devout Christian because money was just the root of all evil. And the love of money is the root of all evil, right? But wealth and finances actually open up new abilities and new platforms for Christianity to be spread. I'll just be honest with you. If Christians didn't have any money or any wealth, you could forget about surviving in this country. You could forget about it. Every wealthy billionaire had shut all the Christian churches down. At least when they started stepping on their toes with the Bible. I mean, it happened. But when you got folks that do have a certain amount of wealth, they have some ability, right? He says that you lack in nothing. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to be the super millionaire, the super billionaire. I don't know that any of us in here that are, and there may be somebody in here that is, that has done a great job of keeping that under wraps, because who else? Nobody's business how much money you got, right? It's nobody's business how much wealth. It's amazing how you'll look at somebody differently when you figure out how much they're worth. It's amazing. I mean, it'll be utterly amazing how you'll change your viewpoint. And that's why some of the most wealthiest people I know, you'd never guess it, because they've learned that. You'll treat me differently if you knew what I have. And some of them have only what they have because it was passed down from generation to generation, and they know that. That's why they act like they still don't have anything, because you treat them different. And that's something that Christians have to work on. That's a personal thing to work on with you individually. And I even find myself, he got plenty of money. Don't worry about him. Well, that's probably, we may need to worry about him some. Because money doesn't solve all your problems, does it? Matter of fact, I find that it creates a lot of problems, and I guess that's why I don't have any. That you may lack in nothing, that you're able to get your meals, your bread, by honest labor, which God will always bless, be chargeable to no man, to no person, And we really need to work on this. We live in a world of debt. We've always, our country's wrapped around debt. We're wrapped around debt, and debt really involves us owing people and having to do things maybe that we wouldn't like to do. I don't find scripturally that God intends us to be wrapped up and involved in debt. Now, I got a lot of debt. So I'm like, I'm not really the best person to speak on this. But I also understand that I need to be ever striving to be debt-free. That not to owe people, not to owe banks, not to owe folks. Get that old house paid off. Get that car paid off. Matter of fact, get where you don't have to finance a car. That's another song, another dance for another day, I guess. But be chargeable to no man or no individual. Be as independent as possible with this, not having to depend. Earn the sweat by your brow and have no obligation to any king. As we move on to verse 13. Verse 13, but I do not want you to be ignorant, brethren, concerning those that have fallen asleep, lest you sorrow as others who have no hope. Now, we're fixing to get into that little bit of that rapture part that we could spend a long time on. I'm just going to probably try to spend the next 10 minutes on it and let you study independently of that and just give you a little different things to chase after maybe. But what had happened was some folks in the church had lost people that they loved, and they were so very sorrowful that they'd lost them. I mean, they were mourning them for long, long periods of time. Not weeks, not days. It was going on for years and years and years. And the Apostle Paul is trying to encourage them that why are you mourning them for this long time period? Because you'll see them again. Because those that, he said, don't be ignorant concerning those that have fallen asleep, those that have passed on, those that are dead, lest your sorrows as others who have no hope. Verse 14, he says, for if we believe that Jesus died and rose again, even so God will bring with him those who sleep in Jesus. Verse 15, for this we say to you by the word of the Lord, that we who are alive and remain until the coming of the Lord will be by no means precede those who are asleep. Verse 16, for the Lord himself will descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of an archangel, and with the trumpet of God, and the dead in Christ will rise first. Verse 17, then we who are alive and remain shall be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air, and thus we shall always be with the Lord. And verse 18, therefore comfort one another with these words. So these words, these next few verses here, they are intended to comfort. In the day which we live in, we have twisted it from something that should be comforting to something that should be argumentative. And that's kind of where we've come at in the church is what Paul has intended to bring comfort. We have found our little bit of comfort in it, but then we've decided that we're just going to argue about when all of it's going to happen. He talks about in the next chapter 5 that, that it's going to come upon you. You understand that the coming of the Lord will come like a thief in the night, but yet it's not going to come on you like a thief because you're always going to be looking, always going to be aware that the Lord is coming. So if you understand that the Lord is coming, then it won't surprise you when He comes. So he talks about that in chapter 5 and how that this verse is not meant for you to sit here and digress. Oh, is it this time? Is He coming now? Because, if I know when He's coming, then I can be well prepared. And in all honesty, the majority of people want to know exactly when He's coming so they can live like the devil for X amount of years and then get ready right before He comes. And that's why God didn't intend for you to know exactly. But the times and the signs tell us kind of maybe the progression and the anticipation of Him. And Scripture does kind of give us these outliers that show us, It's getting closer. It's getting closer. It's getting closer. Here in verse 15, just backing up just a little bit, he says this unto the Thessalonians by the word of the Lord, that it's an express revelation. When Paul says that, it's not something that's been told or preached a lot. Nobody told him this. It's by divine revelation of God that he communicates this, that those which are alive and remain. By the pronoun, the apostle does not intend himself and the Thessalonians to whom he is writing to. He's speaking of the genuine Christians which shall be found on earth when Christ comes to judgment. From not considering the manner, there was an idea there that he was just talking about the Thessalonians in this text and him. But by the pronoun, he's actually talking about everybody, every genuine born-again believer. Shall not prevent them which are asleep. Those who shall be found living in that day, they shall not pass through death, but suddenly be changed. They shall not go to glory before them that are dead, for the dead in Christ shall rise first. They shall be raised, their bodies made glorious, and caught up to meet the Lord before others shall be changed. And this appears to be the meaning of the apostle here. And we can go into a lot of the original text there. But when we look at verse 16, he said, in verse 16, Joe, he said, for the Lord himself will descend, that is, Jesus Christ shall descend from heaven, shall descend in the like manner as the disciples saw him ascend, he shall descend in his human form, is what it means. So for the Lord himself will descend from heaven with a shout. So the appearance of him shall be like that of his ascension. And he will be caught up, and the tens of thousands and millions shall stand before him. For the Son of Man shall come on the throne of glory with a shout. That shout may be simply what brings the dead to rise up, that shout of an archangel. It is very interesting if you study out just the shout part there. It's way long. But let's go on to get to verse 18 and then talk about just a little bit about what, when we talk about the rapture, what it means or what we have a little bit of conflict before we run out of time. He says, comfort one another in verse 18 with these words. It's a strange saying. You know, comfort a man with the information that he's going to appear before the judgment seat of God. Hey, it's going to be all right. Jesus is going to judge you. Oh, is that super comforting to everybody to know that you're fixing? I always think, what would Jesus do? Oh, you know, there's so many times we fall so short of that. Now I know some of you are so super spiritual that, you know, it's not. You prayed up and you're on the spiritual high this morning. You got no issues. You are ready. If it's right now, you are ready. And I hope we're all ready, because if we're not, we need to get ready, right? But then you comfort one another with these. That you can't comfort a lost person with this, can you? But you're going to stand before the judgment seat of Christ one day. He's going to judge you. So it's a unique saying. But he says, comfort one another that we are going to stand before the judgment seat of God. And how do you feel comfort? Well, the only way that you can feel comfort in these, if these words are supposed to be comfortable, that you are 100%, you know that you're born again, that your sins are blotted out by the blood of Jesus, and that you are 100% sure that you got salvation and deliverance. It makes a surety that you are what you say you are. Now, when we get to thinking about these scriptures, it brings up what we basically talked about is what we know as the rapture. Now there's not many arguments about will there be a rapture or not. It's the argument of when the rapture is. This was supposed to be, in Thessalonians, a comforting verse that, listen, you're not always going to be set here. Don't mourn for those dead, because God's going to raise them from the dead. and they're going to be caught up with Him, and they're going to be changed. Their bodies are going to be changed into a glorified body. It's not necessarily an unrecognizable body. It's just a body that may do that. Now, we've got Scripture in Revelations of a new name and different things of that nature, and we can get into some different discussions about that. And, there's always a discussion about, hey, are we going to know folks like we knew them here? What body do you want? You want your young body or you want your old body? So, I'm picking the young body, aren't you? If I get a pick, so if it's not either one of those, right? Because, does God give me my young, good-looking body, or does He give me my old-looking body? Everybody remembers me by the last time they saw me, right? So we get into crazy little talks about stuff like that, which are so trivial. God's going to give you a glorious body. It may, I don't know what, it may be the best, it definitely will be the best version of you, right? Now, I don't know if it will be the best version of you as you know you. But He'll know you, and you'll know Him, and I got a feeling that I might know who you are too. I might even know who you know now. JR might have a totally different name because God's going to give him this new name. I'm going to say, look, I knew him back in the day as JR, but he is like, whatever it is. I don't know what it'd be. It may be something, we may know all kinds of different languages. Who knows? We can get some crazy conversations, about this stuff. But it was intended to be comfort. Well, what happened in our day and time, the rapture has become a big argument of when it's going to happen. Is it going to be before the tribulation? Is it going to be after the tribulation? Is it going to be during the tribulation? Is there a certain amount that goes on before the Lord will come back? So I'm going to give you the 4 different views. I told you, I think when we started this a couple of weeks ago, that 2 views are kind of are really getting faded out. There's not as many people holding to them scripturally anymore, although that you could probably pull out some excerpts and try to make it. Most folks now are what they call pre-tribulation rapture, if you've never heard of that before, and other folks are post-tribulation rapture. Now, there's 2 more tribulation raptures. There's a mid-tribulation rapture, and there's a pre-wrath rapture. Okay, so there's a couple different versions of this, and I'm just going to give you a synopsis on this, and you can take it and you can study on your personal time and things like that. If you want to have a discussion with me, it's just like Sunday school class. We ain't going to be able to have it in 5 minutes. So we might as well not even start talking about it. It's going to be a long conversation because everybody, I have folks, and you that are here on a normal basis don't do this much, but some folks, and I don't care, they say, well, what do you believe, Tom? You never did say what you really believe. And I say, I didn't tell you what I believe because if I tell you what I believe, I'm going to have to give you evidence of why I believe what I believe. So that's going to be another hour or so for me to make this argument. Because I am one of these guys, if I'm going to tell you I believe something, I'm going to tell you why I believe in it. It's not because T.D. Jakes told me, even though me and him may line up the same, or it wasn't because Rod Parsley told me this, it wasn't necessarily because Kate Snows told me this, it's because this biblically. And I'm open to hearing your biblical interpretation also. I'm always open, because you know what I found out in my time? I ain't always right. And especially on things like this, because everybody that holds to a certain belief got some pretty good backing of why. Pre-tribulation rapture is probably what the majority, if not all, are here. Pre-tribulation rapture is the best kind of viewpoint because you don't have to go through tribulation. You get to avoid all tribulation in pre-tribulation rapture, which is wonderful, right? It is the most attached probably point of view of when the rapture is going to take place because we love God and we've been working hard to try to love God and make sure that we're doing it. So God, please take us out, right? We don't want to see none of this bad stuff one way or another. And I like pre-tribulation rapture. But just because I like it doesn't mean it's necessarily the correct way, okay? And I'm not giving you my point of view or not if it's right or wrong, okay? But I will tell you, I really do like pre-tribulation rapture. Pre-tribulation rapture is very, very simple, right? Those holding to the view believe that God will rapture the believers 7 years before Christ makes His return. Meaning that 7 years of tribulation. Thus, Christians will be rescued from the entire tribulation, and the Antichrist rises up after the rapture. You will not see the Antichrist whatsoever. Now, these two they've lost a lot of steam. They used to be really big. When I first started in the ministry 20 years ago, mid-tribulation rapture was the thing. I studied a lot in mid-tribulation rapture. that means that you're going to go through a little bit of tribulation. Revelations has a lot of stuff here that really kind of backs this, but then maybe some other things that you could dispute. This is when God raptures the church halfway through the tribulation, meaning that there's 3.5 years before Christ's return. That's that mid-tribulation part. 7 years of tribulation, the mid-tribulation, 3.5. They were spared the last half of the tribulation when the Antichrist goes in the temple and declares himself God. So there's a lot of folks at one time, but like I said, in today's theology, and it's getting long. This one's probably the least held to, is the pre-wrath rapture. Christians who believe a pre-wrath rapture believe that Christians will go through most of the tribulation. They will be removed from the earth sometime during the second half of the tribulation, but right before God pours out His wrath on a sinful mankind. When this actually happens depends really on the individual believer. There's some say a year, some say 2 before Christ's return, some say even only days before Christ's return, where you're going through a lot. So again, not many people hold that because we can't. You got a lot of difference of opinions, not a lot of scriptural maybe backing to this, although there are maybe some. There's a reason, that train of thought. And then finally, post-tribulation rapture, which is obviously in the view of this, that the rapture and the second coming of Jesus Christ are the exact same event. That second coming is the rapture. Now, with all that being said, that's 4 different train of thoughts. We want to offer those 4 train of thoughts to you because I feel like you need to figure out why you believe what you believe in, not just taking what I believe in. Because there's been a lot of time and a lot of studying in that. Now, if we want to talk about what I feel scripturally has got the most backing, what I lend to, then that's a long Sunday school lesson for that, okay? And we don't have time for that. And I'm glad I'm looking at my watch and not those. All right, so we need to stop. We need to get converted. God bless you for coming out. We finished Thessalonians chapter 4. Chapter 5 reiterates some things from chapter 4 of Paul's purpose. So God bless you. Fellowship with one another. Happy Father's Day again, because I probably won't get to talk to you again in service. God bless you for being daddies, okay? And mamas, God bless you for having the daddy still here.